Well, all right, everybody, here we go. Welcome to episode number 96 of Sports Cards Live. It is Saturday night, May the 8th, 2021. My name is Jeremy Lee. Okay, and before we get to tonight's episode, I do want to thank last Saturday's guest, Andy Albert of the Indie Card Exchange. We had a great show. He told some great stories. Check out that episode on the Sports Cards Live channel on YouTube, where all the old videos exist and are there for your viewing pleasure if you want to go back. I also want to thank last Saturday's After Hours guest. We had Joe Perot joining us. Brody the Kid was unable to, but he will be back again in the future. Next Saturday's guest will be DJ Ski. And on After Hours, we have Adam Gray, editor-in-chief of the Basketball Card Fanatic magazine. Be sure to join us again next Saturday. And tonight on the After Hours show, none other than Brian Gray, Leaf CEO and hobby information overload man. Very excited to have Brian on After Hours tonight, and a friend of tonight's guest. So a nice pairing for the evening for all of us. All right, a couple of shout outs. As always, I want to shout out the podcast listeners. Thanks to all of you guys. Appreciate having you. I want to shout out the Big Three Hockey on Instagram. Give them a follow. There it is on the ticker right now. They showcase fine singles on Instagram all the time. I also want to let everybody know that the Sport Card Expo virtual edition will be June 19th and 20th. There it is on the ticker. Free admission to everybody. Check it out. I will be set up and I cannot wait. And finally, again, I want to mention the Basketball Card Fanatic magazine. New issue came out today and it is now available in print. Check that out if you haven't yet. And later on tonight, after hours, I will be on Clubhouse, hopefully with one or more of tonight's guests and a bunch of you. So check that out. As usual, I do want to thank all the subscribers on YouTube. We're almost at 2,800. I appreciate all of you. And if you are not yet subscribed or you are new to Sports Cards Live tonight, please do give a subscription to the channel on YouTube. And as always, or almost always, your comments and questions are in play tonight. So do not be shy. Look forward to involving all of you guys tonight as per usual. Okay, let us get to tonight's guest, whose first packs of cards were 1973 Topps Baseball. In his teens, he was frequenting card shops and card shows, and he became the card guy at an Indiana coin shop. He went on to become a regional correspondent for Beckett, and he ended up spending approximately 22 years there in various positions. His favorite teams are the Chicago Blackhawks, the White Sox, and the Dallas Cowboys. His favorite athletes are Jeremy Roenick and Walter Payton. Originally from Chicago, Illinois, currently hailing from Plano, Texas. Let's bring him out. Dave Sliepka, welcome to Sports Cards Live. How are you doing tonight, my friend?
Jeremy, I am great. It's a thrill to be here. I'm going to have to remind myself that I'm actually the guest instead of just watching the show. So I'm very excited.
Good, man. Well, hey, we've been talking about this for a while. I've been looking forward to having you on. I mean, you're somebody whose name I've been aware of for many years. It must go back to early Beckett hockey price guide, seeing your name in there. And it's really a pleasure and an honor to get to know you, spend some time with you. This isn't the first time. We had a couple hours a few nights ago. I always enjoy those pre-sessions. And it's really an honor to have you on tonight, just based on your vast experience in the hobby. So let's get into it. What do you say?
Well, the honor's all mine. I really appreciate being here. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so let's jump in. I mean, a guy with a resume like yours in the hobby, I think it's important that we get to understand sort of your experience and what you came through to get to where you are now and some of the experience you've had. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your history from, your mother never threw out your cards, that sort of thing. Did you collect all the way through?
I did, and that's you did a great job with the 9,000 foot view of doing the story from beginning to current. And yeah, I am fortunate that I am one of the few that Mom didn't throw out my cards. And beyond that, Mom used to drive me to card shows and flea markets to set up before I was old enough to have a car. So yeah, I owe my mom a lot to where I'm at, because it started when I was 7 or 8 years old, and it hasn't stopped even in college. You know, you don't have a lot of money in college, but I still found a way to collect or buy some things that I want, or sell a little bit in SCD ads or whatever I had to do. I was always a part of the hobby. And lucky for me, I got to work in it professionally starting in 1991, coming down to Dallas to work for Dr. Beckett. And, things have been great since then, having the opportunity to work at a card shop when I was a kid and, help out with card companies and later on in my career. If you would have told 8-year-old me that I would have had this career, life is great. Life is great.
So tell us a little bit more about your experiences with Beckett, because from our conversation, I mean, you've held various positions. Take us through that timeline, if you will, just to set the stage for people who, I know you got a lot of friends and family and hobby acquaintances and watching right now. But for anyone who doesn't know, tell us, what were your various jobs along the way for Beckett?
Sure. Well, I could start with the job that I didn't get, and I still have the rejection letter from Beckett from 1990. It's kind of a motivation. It's kind of a giggle, but I used my business degree to try and get a job in the industry that I loved. I applied at Beckett for a marketing position, which was my degree from Northern Illinois University, and I got rejected. But somehow my resume, my name got around, and when the hockey magazine started up and it was so successful that they knew that they needed more information than the one hockey analyst that they had there. And I got to know Mike Hirsch, the first hockey analyst. He introduced me to Dr. Beckett at one of the card shows in Detroit, and we met and stayed in touch. And he asked me to become their first regional correspondent, a term that became very important before the internet, because everybody had to ask, is where did Beckett get those prices? How do they know, what's going on out in the market? How do they know what's selling in Chicago versus what's selling in Miami versus what's selling in Vancouver? Well, they had a great network of dealers, collectors, shop owners that provided that information. And Dr. Jim says I was the first that he gave that title to. I did that for a couple of months, and when a second position on the hockey magazine came open, I got a chance to come down to interview for it. They call that one of the best draft classes in Beckett history, because they interviewed 3 guys for one position. I got the position, but the other 2 guys eventually got hired. So you may have heard of Al Muir.
Oh yeah,
and Tom Layberger. They both interviewed, and now they're both in the hockey business as hockey writers. Al's done work for Sports Illustrated. Tom has done some things in Florida. So, we thought that was one of the best Beckett draft class ever when I had the chance to come down to work on the hockey magazine.
So that was your time at on the hockey magazine. What was your next position or role with Beckett?
That was a pretty solid position for 5, almost 6 years, where I had the work on the price guide. Then the veteran advertising executive retired, and I was the kind of person that made contacts and liked to get in touch with different people and got to know people at the card companies. So when they had a position open for an ad executive that was going to manage the card company business, I was the obvious choice because I had the experience and I had the rejection letter. So they knew that I had kind of wanted that position at some point. So for the next 10 years, I was advertising account executive, mainly focusing on the card companies, building relationships with Topps, Upper Deck, Pacific, Fleer, Skybox, Donruss, Collector's Edge, more companies that are out of business than are in. But I still have great contacts with almost all of those companies, and that was a tremendous part of my career that really springboarded the rest of my career, and including Brian Gray.
Yeah. And then you did some work as the Beckett auctions and a merchandise manager as well. What did that entail?
When the internet began, as we know it today, see the gray hair? Yeah. I had the chance to expand work on there, and they called it merchandise manager, meaning that, what ads appeared on the homepage, what dealer information appeared. They wanted to have kind of a hobby expert make some decisions rather than just a business expert. So, doing things that were appropriate for the Beckett business model and people understanding the business. So I did a lot of things with the website, what you saw on the website, what you didn't see on the website, working with dealers for Beckett Marketplace. When Beckett Marketplace began and when it continued, that's a place where dealers from around the country are able to sell their things, and I help them get started and get trained and operate on the website. Transition from that to Beckett Auctions. We had relationships with the with different agents, with different leagues, with the Mighty Ducks, which I think they still do. I think they still are the exclusive seller for Mighty Ducks game worn jerseys, but I began that program through a contact that I had. And so Beckett Auctions is just another thing that I did that used my past experience and helped me with future things as well.
So when you were done your stint there, I forget the exact timeline, but you had a bit of time off, and then you went back in 2015. What happened in 2015 when you went and worked with Beckett again?
When I left in 2013, and in 2015, I had an opportunity to go back as a Beckett baseball editor of the magazine. At that time, they were converting their editing positions to offsite, and I had the opportunity to, they knew that I was kind of available, and they knew that I was preferring to work from home, and that's the kind of person that they were looking for. So for just about 2 years, I was the editor of the Beckett Baseball magazine.
Okay, so that's pretty cool. Working on the price guide in the hockey price guide in the 90s, and then coming back, what's that, 25 years later?
Right.
Wow, what had changed in the meantime? Besides everything. Besides
everything,
besides Dr. If you could think back to like the early days of Beckett, you were there in the early-ish days, I suppose, at the beginning, and then you're back there working, I believe, remotely in 2015 as the off-site editor. But yeah, if there was one big difference or one observation you'd have, what kind of comes to mind?
Well, the obvious is that, Dr. Beckett wasn't a part of the company anymore. He had sold the business, and the business had actually been sold one more time since he had left. So I worked under Dr. Beckett, and then I worked under the additional regimes that own the company after. So, we have to look at things as pre-internet and post-internet, and the information that we provided in the magazines in the 90s was quite different than you provided in the 2010s, because there are so many different ways to get that information. So as an editor, you have to know that you can't put out a story that they have heard about 3 times. They read 3 times in other sources. So it was more of a challenge to find information that would still be valuable by the time it printed. And that is always a challenge in publishing, and was even a challenge in the early days with Price Guide, because we'd seal up the Price Guide data and it would go to the printer and go to the distributor and go to the card shop. And by then the reality is that, some pricing had changed, and we would get a lot of criticism for that. But the reality is it was correct when we made it, or at least we thought so. So publishing is a challenge when you're trying to be timely.
I'm sure. Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt. So I just want to call out, there was someone in the chat here, Joe from ProWare, who was, it looked like it was spamming the chat. So I blocked, but I've unblocked Joe from ProWare, because I see a lot of, I'm sorry, I didn't know who you were, but a lot of people do. So Joe, you should be back able to post in the chat. So I apologize for that. Okay, well, listen, it's great to hear the history, Dave. It sets the stage for kind of what you're doing now as a consultant and all that. Before we move on and learn about what it is that a hobby consultant does, let's just go through. We got a bunch of people here with us tonight, so I want to re-welcome everybody. Great to have you all. So we're going to just do a few hellos from the beginning. Rocco, good evening. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Hockey. Yeah, last hockey night in Canada night of the season tonight. I didn't even realize that, but boy, oh boy. Dennis Lescombe, good evening. We got Corey Carr. Rich Klein is here. Rich, good evening to you. Terry, fresh bread in the voice of Bruce Buffer. It's time for sure. Thank you for that. B. Roy, we got Kevin. We got Hockey. Are Brian Gray and Adam Gray related? No, they are not. We got Charles, Dave Talbot, Yannick, LG. Good evening, Elton Dunn. Dave is the man. Cannot wait to hear him and his expertise. That's great. Same here. Rich says, didn't you have enough with Brian this morning? Yes, Brian and I were co-hosting Hobby Hotline this morning, Brian Gray. And no, you can never get enough Brian Gray. We got Ralphie, we got Will, Kevin W, Jeremy Pringle, Sanderson to Orr. Will says, is it true PSA regarding cards that are sent for just reslabbing? We'll get into that a little bit later, perhaps, Will. Jeff McMahon, good evening. Yamwax is here. We got Absolute. All right, we got a lot of you guys. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. Mickey says, do you like Eminence cards, Jeremy? Sure, I have nothing against Eminence cards, and we will talk a bit more about those a little bit later. Rich Klein says he used to keep that rejection letter hanging up in his cubicle. Right? It's a very cool memento at this point. Hey, Dave, I mean, I think it's really cool.
It's cool memento. It's motivating. It's funny.
Yeah. Steve Menzie, good evening. So this is the Joe that I had blocked before I realized. Will Sani, good evening to you. Kevin says, is the National going down this year? We're going to talk about that a little bit later on as well. Will says that Beckett just has a PhD in stats. Okay, Will, we're going to put you in a timeout. We're not going to deal with rude comments like that this evening. Okay. So let's move along, Dave. So you are now working as a hobby consultant. Tell us what does that look like? What do you do? How does that work?
Well, let's talk about when I left the company that I was at in between my Beckett stints. I decided to go into business for myself. I really knew that I was a connector. I knew that I had a lot of contacts. I knew a lot of people. I knew a lot of people who needed to know a lot of people. And I just thought that, I could really be a connector in this business. And, how can I monetize that? Well, there's not a title out there. It says hobby connector. So I went with the only term that I really knew, and that's consultant. And ironically, that's probably the smallest portion of what I do. I do some consulting, but I am a vendor. I am an editor. I am as a connector, as I said, and information provider. There's so many different things that I do, but very few of them are actually in the consultant role. And I did do more of that in 2020, and I think we'll get to that in a little bit. In talking to people that were not in the business that now want to get in the business, and I found that very interesting. What's been going on this year? Well, so really, looking back on it, it's a pretty poor named company. It's too long. It doesn't accurately say what I do, but it's what I did, and I'm doing great no matter whether it's poorly named or not.
Well, I'll tell you what, in order to make the YouTube thumbnail, I took it and I had to remove all the white from the background, and it took me like 45 minutes to remove the background on the name. But I thought, you know what, I want a nice this thumbnail on YouTube. It's going to last for many, many years, decades, sort of thing. So I spent the time and I went pixel by pixel where I had to, but we made it look good.
Appreciate it, Jerry.
So, but Dave, when you're talking to some of these new people that are coming into the hobby, they're looking for advice, and they find you one way or another. Number one, can you speak to how they find you? And number two, what kind of questions are you fielding from some of these new people?
Sure. Some of them word of mouth. They know who I am. Some I get pointed to or referenced to from other people in the business, because someone might say, I want to get in the business, or I need to know this, I need to do that. A lot of times they work for a company and they say, well, I can't really do that, but I know somebody who can. So I get referrals from a lot of my friends and cohorts in the business. Through my website, a lot of times I get contacts. And there's also some consulting firms that I am connected with where I get contacted for my specific category. So it's like a referral company that it's almost like, consultants are us. How do I find how to get into the hobby? We got this guy over here who knows this, and then they link us up together. And sometimes I find out who the company is or who the individual is. And sometimes I do it blindly, where the names are not shared. but the questions are pretty obvious about, people wanting to get in the business, and some know more about the business than others. Some know none. They just saw a story on the news and said there's money to be made, and how can I get in here and do that? So, I've handled all different kinds over the last year or so.
Okay. So are you finding that some of these people coming in that are reaching out to you, are they asking for are they trying to gain just simply an understanding of the hobby, the different facets of it, or are they looking for like investment type advice or a combination?
Less of the latter, but a lot of times it's they know a little, and they know a little, and they want to know, what am I missing? This seems too easy. Grading, this seems too easy. I buy a 75% piece of plastic and have a guy look at it and seal it up, and I make $40. What am I missing? Well, they're missing a lot. But the good thing is, though, they're asking, though. They know that what don't I know? Well, what you don't know is you have to have, in the grading process, it's not just the grade number, it's what is the card? Do you know what card that is? Not what they put on the form. Is what they put on the form correct? That's a position too. Yeah. People don't realize that in the grading business, that verifiers are just as important part of the process as the graders that put the number on it. And they, or sometimes that they're further down the road in the process where they've got the grader, they've got the system, they got the people that know the business, but where do I get plastics made in China? Or where do I get, how do I just, what labels, how do I get labels printed, or how can I get boxes done? So I don't know everything. No one knows everything, but a lot of times I bring the most value is that if I can bring something that I know that they don't know, and that it happens a lot with a lot of these companies to get into it. And sometimes I feel like I'm talking them out of getting in the business, but it's basically just telling them that it's not as easy as they think it is. And that's being honest. That's not forcing an agenda. It's just saying, okay, you want to do this now. It might take you 14 months to get off the ground. By then, this boom might not be the boom. PSA and Beckett might be caught up. Do you want to be fighting, being the guy that's 20, 15 years behind your competition? So it's asking the right questions, giving them the right information about getting in the business.
Yeah. So, a lot of what you just said had to do with grading. So let me ask you this. We've seen over the last, it seems over the last couple of weeks, but it's probably more over the last few months, we've seen several new grading companies enter the space. And obviously we've got the incumbents. We've had PSA, we've had Beckett, SGC, CSG with their experienced personnel. And then there's the handful, or maybe it's a couple handfuls of new entrants that are coming to the hobby. You've had this bird's eye view perspective of it since grading came around, even working at Beckett when they introduced the grading services, I'm sure. What do you see as the biggest challenges, the biggest barriers to entry for some of these new companies?
Well, as I mentioned before, it's the understanding of the process, and that's, again, not just putting a number on a piece of paper. A lot of times it's diffusing the comments or questions regarding AI. Hey, why don't I run the card through a scanner and that'll grade it for me? Well, what I have seen and what I believe is that might work on surface, and that might work on edges, and in some ways it might work on corners. I'm sorry, but it may not work so well on surface. It may not work so well on authenticity. A counterfeit, without a human eye, might pass and get a good grade. So again, there's things that they have to consider everything. And then the other thing to consider is liability. You're going to be holding these cards for how long? And you're going to be storing them where? And what's going to happen if there's a fire? There's things that people don't consider in the whole process. And I've dealt with some people at various ends of the spectrum of their understanding, and some are well down the line, and other ones, after my 90-minute phone call, they're not interested in the business anymore.
I think one of the questions I have that I would put to all these newer companies that are coming in is really, I think to grade a card, whether you're using AI or just human subjective assessments, you know, that to me is more straightforward because corners can be or centering can be measured, edges can be eyeballed, corners can be eyeballed under magnification. Surface, you need to be able to catch everything that might exist on the surface front and back. But to me, it is authenticity is kind of the one thing that that's where I put most of my trust in the incumbents versus some of the newer up and comers. So, how can these new up and comers circumvent that? How can we as a hobby, we as their potential customers, how can we have faith that they are properly authenticating the cards? I mean, again, grading I think is the easier part. What about, and do you agree with me? Is grading the easier part versus the authentication? And how can we be confident in their authentication skills?
Correct. In general, I would agree. Yeah, that is true. But also in the authenticity part is the identification part. I mean, we all know with these crystal, prism, zebra, stripe, parallel, retail only, blaster, insert. I mean, who knows this stuff? You pull up this card. How do you know where this card came from just by looking at it? The card companies don't do the grading companies and the authenticators and that any favors by saying, this is exactly where this came from. They don't do that. And that's the complexity of this business that only comes through having the right experts. And that is one of the biggest challenges that all the grading companies are having right now. And anybody new coming in the business will continue to have is hiring these experts. Who are these experts? Where do you find these experts? Are these experts willing to work for what you're willing to pay them? That, like you said, the old guard or the people that have worked at Beckett on the gradings for 10, 15, 20 years, same at PSA, they got graders that have been there 10, 15, 20 years. That is the true value of those companies. And as they try and ramp up or hire more people, they're finding tremendous challenges there. And your first thought would be, there's a lot of people in this business. People would love to work for Beckett. People would love to work for PSA. But the thing that you have to realize is that the people that are the sharpest and know all that stuff, it's very easy to make a lot more money sitting right here in front of my computer than it is to work 40 hours a week for X amount of money, working in an office, working for a company. The people that know their stuff, they can use that knowledge to make money. So yeah. It's hard to find somebody willing to work for what they're willing to pay versus what an expert can do with that money. I mean, we could go to that Dallas card show in 2 weeks and I can find you 50 qualified people. 49 of them would say pass. In working in the industry, because the money they're making at that table or their money or they're walking around the room is much greater than what they're going to make at that corporation.
Yeah. So, I mean, the money that when you say the money that they could make at the card show or say at the computer, that's kind of a newer thing in the last year or so when the hobby's been on an upswing. If you look over the past year since I guess early 2020. But as part of that does, I believe, assumes that will continue to be the case. And I mean, I hope the hobby stays strong, and it will. But I guess I kind of for me as a customer, as a collector, and as an investor in sports cards, again, an investor by consequence, I get most comfortable knowing that the cards I have are graded by people with experience, because that's where I can put my trust. So, and that's just my approach. I don't have to put that on anybody else, but that's what I find to be sort of the way that I get comfortable. Because you mentioned the identification, and to me, yeah, I kind of glossed over that, but the identification is hugely interesting. I had the opportunity to visit PSA's offices and get behind closed doors back in 2009, And I mean, we're already 12 years ago. And I remember one thing that sticks out to me, I can still see it pretty vividly, was the research room and the bookshelves filled with resource materials. If you're a new company starting, do you have that resource material ready and available? And where do you get it if you don't? PSA, who's been around for a long time, has been building that over years and years. And again, that's already 12 years ago. I'm sure they have much more at this point. So, I'm not saying these things because I don't want to see any new entrepreneur succeed in the business. I certainly do. But at the same time, I as a collector have to balance that with where do I trust my authentication, identification, and grading to come from. So I think those are some of the biggest hurdles for these new companies, is to just get the trust of the hobby.
Exactly. And luckily, we have the internet, which when a lot of these grading companies began, we really didn't have that. And there is a lot of research material and available online, but it's not complete. I mean, there's new products being released every single week and multiple of them. So to have the people with the skill to be able to identify those things is a critical issue. And the other thing that I've cautioned the people about entering the business is the potential of a fatal mistake. Is that they can do a year of preparation, hiring, grading, building slabs, and marketing and everything, and they kick out the door a couple of cards that have the wrong name on it, or are counterfeit, or both. A few of those start circulating. Are you trusting them? And now with the internet, those images get around quickly. So, you have the potential of investing a lot, having a couple employees make a fatal error, and the business can be sunk.
Yeah. I'm just, while we're here talking about this, and, I just want to put it out there. If anyone watching is an entrepreneur or an employee of any new grading company that aren't the long-term incumbents, I do invite you to reach out to me and invite you on to the show so we can learn and share what it is you're doing and what sets you apart, if you'd like to do that. That's an invitation I'm going to put out there right now. Okay, I do want to say good evening to Bobby Burrell, hobby historian and longtime someone I'm sure you're aware of, that you are familiar with, Dave. David Talbot asks, how does a virtual card show work? And I'm just going to put out there to anybody who was not at the first two virtual sport card expos, that the upcoming one on June 19th and 20th, I will be doing a sort of a preview of it, and we'll go through how it works. So be sure to watch the channel, and I'll be talking about when that episode is going to come up. It's not that far away. It'll be next month. Want to say hello to Sports Card Seller. Want to say hello to Todd McDonald. Card Canuck says, I want to see these new grading companies accurately grade low-grade vintage cards. Fair comment.
That people don't realize that it's actually harder to grade a 3 than it is to grade a 9. And before I even explain it, just think about it. Just think about how many flaws you have to digest versus looking for one flaw. It's easier to grade a 9 or a 10 than it is to grade a 3 or a 4.
And you know what? Maybe a part of it is that, and the way I look at the grading scale, the 1 through 10 with the half grades, is that the margin of condition gets narrower and narrower as you get up the scale, right? A 10 needs to be, I've always said there's an infinite number of conditions of cards out there, millions and millions of different conditions. To say there's only 10 or whatever it is, 19 with the half points, I mean, we need the 10-point scale, but there's millions of potential conditions that a card can be in, not 18 or 19 of them, or 20, whatever it is. So, a 10 is going to be very not flawless, but it's going to have very few flaws or imperfections. Whereas a 1, I mean, there are nice looking ones and there are very ugly ones out there. So the margin or the width of that grading scale for a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to a 2, I believe they're pretty wide. And how do you decide where that cutoff is, or how do you assess that cutoff? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, and that might also come up if we start talking about the investing angle, is that the other thing that people don't think about is when they're looking at comps, they just assume a 9 is a 9 and a 10 is a 10. there are better looking nines that are both nines, and there are better looking tens that are both tens. The flaw can be a different flaw, but they both get knocked down one grade, and some people for the other. So I think that is a something that probably needs to be thought about by some of these investors, is when they see something, they say, oh man, that one, it's crashing, the market's collapsing, that didn't get what the other one got. Well, are we really looking beyond the number?
Yeah.
Because you have to, especially at that high end. And BGS tried to address that by having the subgrades, but even within the subgrades now, with the money that is being spent, which subgrade or how bad is that, is that surface, or where can you see it? Is it on the back? Is it on the front? So just looking at a number and looking at a grade number and a price, it's not always a fair comp, and it's an opportunity for sharp people, and it's a concern for people that aren't paying attention.
Yeah, I agree. You'd like to think that if you were to compare PSA 6s of the same card, that it is apples to apples, but it just isn't, because there are thousands of different PSA 6 cards can look 1,000 different ways and still be a PSA 6. So I've noticed it in PSA 4s. I have a very strong 4, a very weak 4. And thankfully, the sophisticates in the hobby, in the market, they do assign higher values to nicer grades. The sophisticated people, though, but someone who's just getting in isn't aware of this, and that's where the new people need to get educated to be able to not make mistakes. And the last PSA 6, I don't know, Bobby Orr rookie could have been really an ugly 6, and then right? Or let me go the other way. It could have been a beautiful 6. It could have been a high-end 6, and then the next 6 comes out. They say, "Oh, well, the last 6 sold for $25,000. Here's a 6. It's a 6. I'm gonna bid $25,000 on it, but really, that might be $10,000 more than the next person would have paid." So it's important. It's definitely important to understand that not all 6s, 7s, 8s are the same.
Exactly, and not that they're not. We're not even saying that they're wrong. They could be both correctly 6s. Yeah. But they have a difference that might be a preference to more people than others.
Yeah, it's like, if you look at a PWCC auction on eBay where they talk about the technical grade assigned, and that's the important wording there, is the technical grade assigned is not the eye appeal grade. Those are different things. So
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, I want to go to a couple comments here. Rich Klein says, I honestly think one thing which should be done at any of the companies which handle cards is to outsource to remote, like Dave was with Beckett Baseball. He goes on to say, to outsource some customer service, one person at home office to be a liaison, an ID consultant getting scans, and any other positions which can be done and not be in the office. As we've learned in 2020, 2021, the more that can be done from someone's home, the better off the company is. And I mean, Rich works at ComC, one of the companies that has sort of suffered from the pandemic and the uptick in the hobby the most, more than some other companies. So he definitely knows what he's talking about, and I think that's a good plan. From Rich, another hobby industry veteran who's been around even longer than you, Dave, right?
Yes, no question.
Yeah.
He preceded me at Beckett by, I think, just about a year, little under a year, but we have great stories where we first met at the National in 1989. So we even knew each other before either of us worked at Beckett.
Okay. Steve Menzie, who owns the Sport Card Expo, the virtual expo, he says, number one is authenticity. And we're talking about importance in the important things with grading, and I believe a grading company. So in Steve's opinion, number one is the authenticity, or the ability to authenticate, I believe he's saying. Number two is access to a database and POP report. Yeah, that's hugely important. Number three is the secondary market, where true market value is determined. Yes, very important, but that's going to be a huge challenge to any of the newcomers, because they're starting from scratch. So that's pretty. I appreciate that of those comments, Steve. Let's go to Bulldog Trading. He says, "Hi from Chicago, Dave. What would you say is that little bit extra in a card that would take it from a 9.5 to that rare 10 grade?" Now, he must be talking about Beckett Grading Services, because we know PSA doesn't offer 9.5. So with respect to Beckett grading cards,
I think you probably just need to look at it the other way. Is that what is it that keeps it from being a 10? Not You can't add something to make it a 10. Is what is being taken away that makes it the 9.5. So again, it's centering, corners, edges, surface. Which one of those is not fully perfect to get to the 10? And that's why they have the subgrades, is it should tell you if you got a couple of 9.5s and a 10, or 3 10s and a 9.5. It should tell you, what is missing. Everything has got to be there. You can't look at something and say, oh, this is a 10 except for. A 10 doesn't have an except for.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people have played that the resubmission game where they have a card. It's a BGS 9.5 with what they call a true gem, or all the subgrades are 9.5. They'll have a true gem plus, so 2 9.5s and 2 10s, and you need that third 10 to bump it from a 9.5 to a 10 overall.
Correct.
And my understanding has been that I think it's that the easiest place to get that is going to be on surface. So if the surface is a 9.5, that's going to be your best chance to be bumped to a 10. That's just what I've been told by people, I think, who have played that game a little bit. Does that resonate with you? Does that make sense to you?
Generally, that's probably correct. The resubmit game can happen anywhere. I mean, again, the grading process is human. If you honestly feel like, hey, they were a little too tough on this, and I'm going to take a chance. I want to resubmit it again. A lot of times it's not specifically where the flaw was located, but you're correct on surface is that, and it goes the other way too, is that maybe somebody caught it the first time and they're gambling again and thinking that surface mark is so minor. Maybe if I send it through again, they're not going to catch it this time. Yeah. So generally that is an accurate statement, but it can't happen in any of the 4 categories.
Yeah. Okay. Seth Gordon says, why would anyone start a new grading company? Makes zero business sense unless you're going to hire away grading experts from PSA, BGS, etc. I mean, I kind of chuckle at the make zero business sense because we don't know yet. We don't know yet if it makes business sense. Some of the new ones, I think the cream will rise to the top. The best will survive, and then it will have made good business sense for them. But thanks for the comment, Seth Gordon. Stephen Foley, good evening. Glad to have you as always. And AJ15 Card says, are there classes people have to go through to be a grader or to work for a grading company? I got a bit of a response to that, but Dave, can you speak to that?
Not outside of the company. I mean, there's not a grading university or anything like that. They each grade and train their own employees. Beckett, it used to be very difficult to even begin grading. I mean, they would start employees in the verification process where, you don't begin to think about putting a number on a card for a year. Again, used to be. What's happening now, I can't speak to. And, but they were very, very concerned about letting somebody grade, until they were very comfortable with the process. So each company does their own training, verification. Beckett's testing was pretty rigorous. I mean, there would be tens to hundreds of people apply, and you'd be surprised. They'd just say, no, you're just not going to cut it, and that would come through even test grading. Is that, here, what do you think this is? And if they were close and it was something that could be taught, there's a prospective employee. But if they're just completely not, not getting it, they more want to be there than should be there. That's where it's hard to find employees in this business.
So yeah, and that's what my answer would basically be, is that no, there's no course, there's no preordained course that's out there that all the graders, for all the potential graders go to, whether you're going to get a job at PSA, Beckett, or any of the other companies. But rather, these companies have employees with years and years of experience that pass that knowledge on. And that's the key, is that they're passing it on to the new graders. And I love when you said that, they would just let somebody go if they weren't getting it. It seems to me like you need to have a bit of a knack for it. You have to have an eye for it, and that it may be, it's teachable to the extent that the candidate is coachable and can learn those skills and pick up on it. So Do you think, Dave, that in order to be a grader, it helps to be a collector, to come from a collecting background? How many, like, let me ask it to you this way. How many years of hobbying would you say somebody needs to be a grader, if any?
That's interesting because my first response would be I don't know if they would have to be, but I've never heard of one that wasn't.
Yeah.
So, I've never even seen an applicant or someone interested in being a card grader that wasn't in the hobby. So it kind of goes hand in hand. I would hope or think that a minimum would be 5 to 10 years. And again, if it was only 5, but it was working in a card shop and they did a lot of business with ungraded cards, and it's what was that 5 years? Were they just a collector for 5 years? Probably not enough. Yeah. But did they have real hands-on experience working at a card show, working at a card shop, handling cards? It just depends on what that experience was, but I'm thinking minimum 10 years, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's what I would like to see in some of these new companies. And again, I'm going to put that invitation out there. If anyone is watching is with a new grading company, please reach out. Let's get you on the show and let's talk about what you're doing. And I want to give everybody a fair shake. So,
or if anybody's looking for a job, I can point you in the right direction.
There you go. Reach out to Dave. We have his Instagram handle is floating on the ticker as we speak. Eric Perry said variance between cards with the same numeric grade can be massive. Centering, for instance, can make a major difference in hammer price. 100%, Eric. I completely agree with that. Card Collector says, man, this information from Dave is awesome. Great guest. As always, Jeremy, loving it. Thank you, Card Collector 1982. Let's see. I see we have some stuff from Brian Gray below. We'll get to those. Stephen Foley says, would it make sense just to grade on a 100-point scale? And Seth says SGC used to do that. And then they just got away from that semi-recently. And I think let me ask you, why do you think SGC got away from the 100-point scale?
Because they were the only one doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, they were third place, and first place and second place in the business was just doing the 10-point scale. And I think it's kind of like Beta versus VHS back in the day. Beta might have been better, but more people were used to the VHS. Now they're both dead, so it doesn't matter. But that's my antiquated example. That I think more people are used to it. It's easier to explain. And I think even if we all agreed to go there, all the companies, we'd be having this conversation in 10 more years, talking about the differences between a 91 and a 92. Yeah, how there can be variances in a 91. So
yeah, a lot harder to identify those variances anyway, for sure.
Yeah.
Again, it's a narrower band of conditions. So, okay, let's go to this one here. Absolute Authentic says, what efforts are being used now to curb resubmissions? Dave, are you familiar with Genamint?
Vaguely familiar with Genamint, but regarding curbing resubmissions, why would they want to curb resubmissions? I mean, it's your card. You got it back. You didn't like the grade. You want to crack it out and send it back in. Card companies don't care. The collector, that's their choice. They're getting paid to grade it, the same card twice, and they're paying the same price. I don't think there's any reason to curb it. Maybe I'm missing the question or not understanding the angle, but the only thing that I think the industry suffers from in resubmissions is the population reports, because then it appears that 100 cards were graded, but it really could have been 95, and 5 of them were submitted twice. So from that standpoint, I wish there was a better way to have done that, but the cat's out of the bag. The horse is out of the barn on that one. We're not gonna be able to fix that. It's just, if you understand it and you can use that information to your advantage.
I mean, I think one of the things with Genamint is that it's going to have this fingerprinting technology and be able to really identify whether a card has already been through the system, whether it's broken out of the original holder and resubmitted or still in that holder. And to me, what that does is it prevents the grading company from putting out a new grade. One of the biggest knocks against grading that I'm aware of over the past several years is that you've heard people say, oh, you don't like the grade you got? Just send it back. Keep sending it back until you get the grade that you want. Now, doesn't that undermine the whole grading industry to an extent if you can just keep on resubmitting it until you get the grade you want? For that reason, I like this Genament technology that will apparently disincentivize people from sending the same card back, at least to PSA, who owns this technology now, at least from sending it back to them over and over again to get that same grade. And like you said, Dave, it'll help to keep the population reports more reliable as well. So I'm still getting my head around it, but I think I'm of the position that I mean, the whole resub game, it's been, I had Eric Myers on the show, a friend of yours, a few weeks ago, and he mentioned he did the resub game in his earlier years and made a lot of money doing it. And because if you get that bump, it can be very valuable. But doesn't that make the company look kind of bad if they give you a different grade on the same card on a different date if the card remained the same?
It can, but I think there's assumption there that if you just keep resubmitting, you eventually will. I mean, that's a false assumption. I mean, if it's borderline enough, we are talking about third-party opinion, and you're hoping to get the guy that has the same opinion you do, that it's a 9 and not an 8.5. But I think to have the assumption that the more times you do it, eventually it's going to happen, that's just false, because I've even had some people, I've helped some people that aren't familiar with grading to help them walk through the process. They've gotten the card back and they said, well, let's just I really think that's X. And if I send it back, it should be Y. And I just say, this is not going to go away. That centering is not going to change. You're looking at 2 subgrades. Even if this one subgrade changes, what we call bumps, even if you get 1 bump, you're not getting 2. And now with the grading, the price of grading, if it's a high dollar card, you want to keep paying $300 each time.
Yeah.
So I think we have to get past the idea that if you just keep doing it, it's going to work. That's just false. If it's borderline and you truly find something and it can change, God bless you. Hopefully that happens for you, but not at a $300 per submission price.
No, yeah, I agree. Okay, a couple comments, and I just have a question I want to ask you. Eric Perry says, newcomers sometimes treat graded cards like commodities with no regard for the subtleties. This creates opportunity for savvy collectors. Experience matters. Yeah, very well said, Eric. You
100%.
agree?
Yeah. 100%. And that goes back to my comments about why they can't hire graders. Because people that understand what he just said, they can use that knowledge to make money.
Yeah.
Do you want to use that knowledge to make PSA money? Yeah, you get a salary, but I mean, you know what I'm saying, is that if you understand those intricacies, you can use that to your advantage.
I learned this going to the National, probably it was a certain dealer that I bought a vintage card from at the National, going back to maybe 2010, 2011. And I'll tell you the dealer in a second, but he basically, all of his cards were priced higher than comps. And I kind of looked at him, I thought, wow, that much? He goes, yeah, it's strong for the grade. And then I go to another card. I'd say, yeah, he'd go, it's strong for the grade. And then we had a conversation. He explained to me that he only buys cards that are strong for the grade. So every card in his showcase was strong for the grade and aggressively priced. Well, let me tell you, I made it a mission that every National I bought at least 1 card from him, because I like my cards to have strong eye appeal, because I'm like, wow, that's a great card, but whoa, the price compared to what I'd look at on eBay, the recent sales. So if you have an eye for it, and his name is escaping me. He's a doctor. He goes by Card Country, and he sets up with a gentleman by the name of Brady, who has like the most amazing pre-war vintage baseball card collection at his booth. It's just like an unbelievable array of cards. I don't know if you're familiar with these guys or not, but they've been setting up the National together for at least 10 years. And I bought cards from both of them over the years. And every card I bought from them is very strong for the grade, because, I like eye appeal. So
Well, I'm
Anyway,
glad it's true and not just what he's saying.
no, it's true. I
Some
will.
people will say that and it not be true. And
That's that's another thing. Be careful. You have to be able to assess the vendor you're buying from, you're dealing with, as well as the cards they're selling, because it's so easy. And people listening right now might, I'm just going to tell people they're strong for the grade. Well, now if you hear that at the next show later on this month, make sure you know for yourself, or bring in an expert at the show. Ask a buddy to come take a look at this card and make sure it truly is strong for the grade. Yeah. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. That's my idea, everybody. Strong for the grade. That's my t-shirt.
I'm strong for the grade. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. Okay. Brian Gray says that Beckett needs graders badly. Oh, sorry. We're going to start up here with this earlier comment. He says new grading companies have an incredible opportunity with the holes in the market. While they may not garner the long-term respect of the leaders, they can make lots of money for now. Okay. And he says Beckett needs graders badly. If you have basic skills, there could be an opportunity to learn the job and make a nice living. And I have to think that the pay scale is better than it's ever been to be a grader. That's an assumption. I don't know. I've never been offered a job at a grade. I don't know what they pay, but I have to think it's better now than it's ever been. Do you have any insight into that?
Not exactly, but I can say what you just said is a fact. Yeah. You're going to get paid more now than you did before, because there's more competition for those positions and they need people. And I say they, I'm not just saying BGS. I'm saying Beckett, HGA, all of them. PSA. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Chris Dornick, when a card is being graded, does the grading company trust their graders to have their best judgment, or is there a set of guidelines to follow? Do you know? I mean, you go to any of their websites and they tell you what their grade point is, what the grade scale is, and they tell you how many flaws each grade point can have and what the centering needs to be. I've seen that on PSA. I'm pretty sure I've seen it on Beckett's website as well. So there are guidelines. I think that goes with saying. Do you agree?
I agree, because I think that's one of the first things that they're going to say is that this is BGS's or PSA's opinion of the grade. The slab is not going to say, Chris Dornick's opinion. It's going to say Beckett's opinion, and Beckett is going to train their employees within those guidelines, as is PSA, as is SGC, and all the rest. Is that, yes, I would think any good card company is going to train them not to give their opinion, but to give the opinion of which they've been trained to give.
So Brian Gray says highly experienced graders can make $100,000 plus. He goes on to say senior grader level guys. And I mean, to me, if you're going to give up the hobby to be a grader, I mean, the junior guys have to be making $100,000. I don't know who you're going to get for under $100,000 at this stage of the world with all the new money that's been printed out there. We've seen inflation, right? What are your thoughts? What do you think it would take to get somebody out of the hobby to be a grader, like salary wise?
That is, and that's the problem, is that when he's talking about that 100 level, that's not somebody off the street. That's somebody that's been at one of the companies for 2 to 3 to 5 years. I mean, they're not going to risk that kind of number off the street. Yeah. So I don't, again, I'm not quoting facts from any individual company, but I would hope that they are in the 50 to 60 range right in the front door.
Yeah. Yeah. Rich Klein says, if you're a PSA, for example, why would you not want to accept resubs? The user has to pay for the card to be graded or regraded. So why not? I mean, my response to that, and I could be wrong. Well, I can think of 2 reasons. Number one, the backlog, although that will be addressed and we'll move forward from that. But number 2, I think is just the fact that do you want the same card to get a different grade on 2 different days? And to me, that's a consistency issue that we need to be comfortable that you're going to get the same grade every time that same card is sent in. And there's risk that wouldn't happen. So it's reputational from my perspective, but that might be very naive of me to say because the almighty buck might rule. What do you think?
No, I think that is true. They would feel the same way. They don't want to have to correct themselves. They don't want to have an error that has to be corrected. They are striving for that consistency all the time. But at the same time, we're humans and we're going to have good and bad days, and we're going to catch things and we're going to miss things. And that's just the nature of what we're looking at. It's not a science. It's not scientific to find these flaws. So yes, they are striving for that resubmission program to not work.
Yeah.
But sometimes it can be worth it.
Well, and that's what this Genament technology is going to do, whether PSA likes it or not, is it's going to let them know if a card's been submitted before. So if you want to pay them to look at it again and they already know what they graded the card last time, well, go ahead, give them another $300 or whatever it is, and you're going to get that card back with the same grade. So,
see,
right?
To me as a consumer, I don't like that, because once you take it out of the holder, the previous grade is invalid. You could have nudged, nicked, scraped, but in that process.
Agree, but the card's not going to go up in condition. It's not going to get into better condition. It's only going to go down in condition if something happens to it.
Correct. But if a grader is given a previous grade in advance of looking at the grade, I don't like that. I think it should be looked at on its own merits at the time that it's in his hand. So corporately, if they want to know after the fact, they say, previously we saw this was a 9 and now you're giving it a 10. Corporately, I hope that is when they look at it, but not as if they're telling the grader that, hey, here's this card that came in last week. It was a 10 last week. What do you think of it now? That would be bad. And I would, as a submitter, I wouldn't like that.
So, the solution, you kind of glossed over the solution to that, which is the grader would regrade the card without knowing what the previous grade was. It would be a blind grading. You would then assess it. And if it's different, then maybe it has to be looked at closer to make sure, did it really go down? Did the condition really get worse? And if it got stronger, maybe it needs a way. And I mean, it's not to say that they won't bump it up. If you get a team of guys, hey, I looked at it, I don't see why this was a 9 last time. This is definitely a 10. Gentleman tells us the card hasn't been altered or affected or paper added back or anything like that. So maybe we got to bump the grade up. And if that's how they would run the Genament addition to the PSA process, I'd be okay with that. But the grade, you can't bias the grader by letting them know the grade previously. And I think PSA would be smart enough not to do that. But I'm not behind closed doors, so not exactly sure.
We hope, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to welcome Toa Hang to the show as always. What's up with you, buddy? AJ15 makes, this sums it right up there. Buy the card, not the grade, buy the card, not the grade. But you want,
I say that all the time.
You want the card to be authentic. That's the key to all of it, I would say. PSA Slab Guy says, I heard Nat talk recently about trying to cut down or eliminate resubmissions using the technology. Long-term benefits of brand/grade integrity outweigh short-term revenue. See, that's why I'm so happy about the new leadership at PSA, because I think Nat understands these concepts and will put the long-term. Nat's a young guy. This isn't a 60-year-old dude who bought PSA. Right. He's in his 30s. He's got a lot of years left to deal with this company and its reputation and the brand. So I think he's going to be much more long-sighted than short-sighted, or looking much further out than just worrying about getting a bunch of resubmissions in right now to pump up the revenue. So at least I hope so. Okay, the comments are coming in. Lots of great stuff here, guys. We do have other things to talk about, and this isn't just the grading episode, but I mean, obviously the chat wants to hear about it. I do have a question for you. It's on grading, Dave. My question is, as somebody who's worked in the industry, people at the companies, and I'm a collector, and I read postings on all sorts of platforms. And one of the postings I read a couple of these today actually on Instagram. People have long time accused grading companies of giving special treatment to certain submitters, maybe taking, maybe greasing the palm sort of thing. I like to think it doesn't happen, but I mean, I don't know. I'm not there, so I don't know for sure. What based on your place in the hobby, what do you think?
It's pretty easy for me to say, oh no, that doesn't happen. But I know the systems that are in place that the grader when he's looking at the card, he does not know who submitted the card. Now, are there ways around that, or can that be cheated? Well, that would take a pretty large internal conspiracy to make that happen. But the general systems, especially, my experience from Beckett, I mean, I know how that goes, that the grader has no idea whose card he's grading. And far from it. And for him to figure it out or try and do that, other people are going to have to know. So, even before Beckett started, I heard that about PSA. If you submitted a certain number, you're guaranteed a certain percentages of tens. Well, I didn't believe that then. I don't believe that now. There's just too much integrity in these companies. As you mentioned earlier, in talking about, I want to trust these people. If that was going on, it would show up in the product, where you would see over and over and over cards that do not look like they meet the standard because they got through the system in some other, cheated way. So call me naive, but I've been on the side and I've seen some systems, and I also just don't believe it's worth the risk for that to even happen. I mean, can there be wayward employees, and have there been things probably caught, but I don't think ever, caught having after the fact, but maybe caught trying to do something. But no, I have a hard time believing that is a real issue.
Yeah. I mean, I hope it is not. And I'm the same position as you. I'm going to sort of take that leap of faith. I'm sure people out there call me naive right now, and maybe you as well, but that's okay. You can have, there's some people that are just skeptical by nature. And I think it's healthy to have a degree of skepticism. I'm trained as a financial statement auditor. And when you go into a client, you go in with what they call professional skepticism. So you're on the lookout for fraud, but you don't assume everyone's committing it.
Correct.
That's called professional skepticism. I approach the hobby and the companies within it in the same way, because it works. It works mostly in the capital markets. So it should hopefully work a lot, somewhat similarly in the hobby. Okay, here's another one I want you to address from Seth Gordon. He says, there's been talk recently about PSA giving less tens. Any truth to population control at work here? Now, we don't know the truth, but we can opine on it. So Dave, what do you think?
I can't say that I've heard the same thing, is that the impression is, since the volume is so high, that it's been getting tougher. Same as your last question, I would like to see some evidence as opposed to some opinions. So is that true? I don't know. Of course, I don't know the answer. I would have a hard time believing that somebody walked through the grading room and said, let's make things a little tougher over there, okay? I can't believe that would be an edict, or that would be an instruction. I don't know who they're helping, including themselves, by doing that. So again, if you could, show me some evidence and we can talk, but right now I'd have that hard time believing that is fact. And there's so many things that are thrown out there like that again, they're based in confusion. They're based in opinion. They're based in anger.
Yeah.
We heard it all the time at Beckett when I was working on price guides, that the different theories and things of why prices went up or why they didn't go up. And, sitting there hearing it and then knowing what was going on the other side, you just go, where do they come up with this?
Yeah.
Where is this coming from? Before pre-internet, one of my favorite ones was that, Jim's two sons owned a card store, and that's why Frank Thomas 90 Leaf went up and yada, yada, yada. Well, that's so far from the truth. He doesn't even have a son, let alone them owning a card shop. So, I mean, again, let's not worry about rumors and opinions. Let's try and find some evidence.
Yeah, I like that approach a lot. I want to call up here because Maestradamus brings up a really good point in how a card can actually get into better condition than the first time it was submitted. And I didn't think of this when I was first speaking. So I'm going to definitely think this way now, because yeah, you can clean up fingerprints from a card, maybe, whatever it might be. You can actually clean up a card without altering that card. I think fingerprints is the best way. I can't tell you how many group breakers I've seen with these nice chromium finished cards, and they put their fingers on the front surface of the card in the back, and that's going to transfer the oils on your fingers onto that card, whether you washed your hands or not. There's going to be something there, especially by the time you get to the later on in that box or that case. So there's something to be said for someone will submit a card without wiping off fingerprints or with there being a fingerprint on them. And then, you can clean up and you can get that bump in surface grade. So I do want to thank Mastradamus for bringing that to my attention. I did not think of that on the fly earlier in the show. So great point there. Please.
Now let's go to the gentleman situation. How is that going to affect them? We're talking, say that card had a big fat fingerprint. They wiped it off. It's not doctoring. They didn't do anything nefarious. And now that goes in, but the system is going to say that at a worse grade. And now as a better grade, what does PSA gentlemen do with that information?
They reassess. I think they have to reassess. They have to get more than one person on it. And they have to they have to spend more than whatever time is allotted per card currently. And they have to look at that, and they have, these are going to be those exception cases that are you got the conveyor belt, and then every 10th card goes that way instead of that way, right? Yeah. Those ones need a special team to look at and say, okay, something, we didn't get it right the first time for whatever reason, we're going to bump this one up. And I got no issue with that. And, and I think Rich Klein down here says, all those comments are proving my point. I think he might. I'm sorry, Rich. I don't know what comment that was because we're already 11 minutes old here. But I do think that might be what he's maybe getting at. So forgive me if I'm wrong, Rich. But, is that there may be some instances where the grade will go up and others where the grade will go down. But at least they know they've seen the card before. I think there's some value to it to know it. And now they can change the POP report because they know they've seen that card before, which helps the POP reports as well. So
have they addressed, will that happen? Is that a fact? Have they addressed that?
No, okay. But from my understanding of the technology and PSA services, this would at least allow them to have that data, that information. So moving forward, it's not going to help the past, but it should hopefully help moving forward. So
good.
Here's another, great chat, guys, tonight. Delon says, I think you should be able to rebuttal a grade, basically to fight it or to say, and one thing we can all agree is that when you get a card back from PSA or Beckett, aside from the subgrades on Beckett, you don't know why the card graded as it did. There's nothing telling you what the flaws were, which I think would be a nice value add. So all that said, what do you think, Dave? Do you think that you should be able to rebut a grade?
I do, but that's not going to happen in 2021.
Not for free,
or at any price beyond full price.
Yeah.
I think that's something that Beckett was more open about when we were not in the business of 2020, 2021, but the flow, the business, the quantity, they're just not available to have that kind of thing. I mean, you used to be able to visit with a grader or talk to somebody at the National and say, what am I missing? What did I do here? They used to be able to have that hands-on a little bit more, but that's a tough ask right now. I think that it's a very fair question, very fair opportunity. Just don't expect it this year.
Yeah, not without paying for it.
Right.
Okay, I want to read Toa's comment here. He says, you can already see all these copycat grading company. I just call them new entrants. I mean, anyone doing it is doing what's already being done. But you can already see all these new entrants trying to enter the space with their computer grading tech and cool labels. So yet no transparency on what and how. Be careful. And transparency is so important. So, and again, I invite all these new grading companies, any of them, to come on the show. Reach out, let me know if you want to come on, and let's hear what you're doing that sets you apart, what your competitive advantage is, what your experience is, all these things to address the concerns that we have been putting out there today. I'd love to hear from all of them. Do you have any comments on that, or because I want to bring the next question on, but I don't want to if you have a comment, Dave.
I think you covered it well.
So Greg wants to know to you, do you think future PSA 10s with the new technology will be worth more than current PSA 10s?
That's an interesting question, isn't it? Maybe. I'll give you a big fat maybe on that one. I think it would probably be on specific circumstances of low pop. I can't see it just being a general rule now, but on certain circumstances of a low pop, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's only 2 or 3 of them graded and they're both the same grade, then we can talk. But I don't think in general, when you're looking at something that there's 16,000 copies of them graded and you're saying this one was under the new technology, I don't think it's going to matter as much.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree. I think that the standards themselves aren't going to change. So what is a PSA? What defines a PSA 10 now versus a PSA 10 after Genament isn't going to change. So if the new technology is just better at grading, then that's one thing. But I think we have to keep in mind that I believe that a human is still going to verify or corroborate the final grade assigned. If Genament even does put a grade out there, maybe it does, but you have to think that a human is going to have to right?
Yeah,
have to confirm that for sure. So
have to.
And the fact that the standard isn't going to change, what is defined as a PSA 10 now will still be a PSA 10 later. The other thing that I think could actually have the opposite effect and increase the value, and this is not my original idea, this came from Brian Gray this morning, is that if PSA does introduce some special 10, a pristine or some 10 plus sort of grade in the future, if they do, totally speculating, all of a sudden, there might be a run on PSA 10s that are currently out there now to try and get the bump to the higher level, which could increase the value of all the PSA 10s historically, versus what some people are kind of rushing to assume that they're going to come down, that they might come down in value, even though I think a lot of people are just asking the question. So here's one for you, Dave. What are your thoughts on the price premium of PSA over BGS slabs? Is it sustainable?
Good question, because there's no doubt that it has expanded in the last couple of years, which kind of has been a surprise to me. You go back a few years ago and you could pretty safely say that a BGS 9.5 was equal to a PSA 10 in most cases, and that's just, you can't just blindly say that anymore. Do I think that BGS will catch back up? Is it sustainable? Tough question, but right now it is, there is some truth to it. It's just difficult to predict.
It's going on. Yeah. I think it really comes down to brand equity more than anything, and just consumers' perceptions and influencers out there. There's like that. The famous one is Kendrick Perkins coming out and saying, if it ain't PSA 10, I don't want it. Something like that. Right.
Right.
And that has an impact on people. But these things can change. These things can change over time. And for now, I think there's no disputing that PSA has the biggest share of the market. I think, I don't know these stats, but that's my perception. So I'm going to leave it at that. I won't say for sure. That's my perception. And until that changes, that they're going to get the premiums. And I think more people do play on their population reports as well than any other population reports out there. I don't know. I used to think the set registry. That's what I mean.
Yes.
I used to think that, and I'm not sure if I still do or not, that the set registry was one of the biggest factors that gave PSA those extra value, because more people were competing on the set registry. I'm not sure I believe that as much as I did before anymore, and I'm not sure. I ask you, Dave, do you think the existence of the set registry, is it as powerful as it once was? Is it still something that is contributing to these premiums that PSA gets over BGS?
Yes and no. And and that's not a cop-out answer. There are certain cards in low pop that people are trying to complete a set where for example, a 1988 Mike Krushelnyski, where there's only a couple of 10s. It matters.
Yeah.
You get one in a BGS, it's not going to matter as much, but I can guarantee you one thing is that when that if a BGS 10, 88, 89 Krushelnyski shows up, it's getting cracked and sent into a PSA anyway. So there's tremendous power in that pop report, but it's a smaller percentage of the market than what it used to be. I'll just say that 3 years ago, it mattered more, not because there's less people doing it now, but there's more people collecting without that.
Yeah.
So it's a firm yes and no.
That you're right. That yes and no makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm a case study myself. I was very active on the set registry, and I actually found it was causing me to buy cards I didn't really want. Like I don't need 360 Hall of Fame hockey players when I don't even know who a few dozen of them are.
Right.
So I kind of just stopped I kind of stopped my registry activity and I'll just create my own checklist sort of thing. But that's just been my approach. So and I guess I'm projecting that a little when I say I don't know if that's having as much effect as it used to. But your Mike Krushelnyski example is very funny, and I always wonder, how do you come up with Mike Krushelnyski? He was actually when I did my very first hockey draft in 1984 or 1985. Oh, I don't know if he was even around back then, but I remember picking Mike Krushelnyski in the 80s in a hockey pool. Anyway,
that's not a random example. That I'm talking about a true situation.
Okay.
That card is impossible to get. I think it's centering and a print dot or something, but there's a crazy low number of 10s on that card. So that wasn't just an example. That is one of them.
That's a case study itself.
Yeah.
Okay. Rodman Martinez, welcome, buddy. Says all the best conspiracy theories are born on blowout. Fair enough. I mean, that seems to be where a lot of them come from. And then Todd McDonald says, what is your opinion on sheet cut cards? And to be clear, and I know you know, Dave, but to be clear for the audience, we're talking about cards that are not pack pulled and that were not cut at the factory, but were cut by somebody other than the manufacturer at a later date. What do you think? What do you think of those, Dave? Sheet cut cards.
Boy, I sat in the center of that debate.
Ooh, did you?
Yeah, because Beckett graded them and PSA didn't.
Yes.
And trust me, that was just, was that right or wrong was a discussion that was had many times and probably is still happening. I think BGS made the right decision that they are real cards. They were cut somewhere else. They measure to the standard. I think they should be graded. But I also think it's kind of obvious. I think when you see a Gretzky with a clean cut like that, you know that didn't come out of a pack. Now, if you don't like sheet cut, then don't buy that card. You should know that. But am I against sheet graded cards being graded? I'm not against it. No.
Fair response. I mean, I'm thinking as you're speaking, and I don't even know if purist or traditionalist is the right term, but I consider myself to be, my approach is if a card's gonna be in my personal collection, I want that card to have come out of a pack, hopefully by some kid in that vintage era, that decade back then. And it somehow survived through till today. That's what I want in my personal collection. So with that being the case, it's not fair of me to say, oh, well, no company should grade these, or these should not be eligible to be graded. But we do have the right to choose what we want to purchase. I agree with you. They're pretty obvious most of the time. We just had that BVG 10 Bobby Orr sell, and the seller out of Winnipeg, I think he thought he was going to get $1 million for it, and the card only got just over 200 grand or something like that. And I mean, to me, that's about where it should have sold. There's no way that card, I think, should have sold for $1 million. Now, if that was a PSA 9, which there's only one in the population, It's easily $1 million card, being the finest Bobby Orr rookie pack pulled on the planet. So let me rephrase the question to you, because what you said was you have no issue with those cards being graded. What about value wise? Do you think that, and everyone will choose for themselves, I understand that,
right?
But for you, where would you value a sheet cut? Let's use a Wayne Gretzky O-Pee-Chee rookie card as the example. If a PSA 9 pack pulled O-Pee-Chee Gretzky rookie is selling now for about $225,000, what do you think, or what would you be willing to pay if you had these funds available for a sheet cut BGS whatever 995 or 10 O-Pee-Chee Gretzky rookie? I'm trying to be sorry.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one, because like we said, the market corrects itself, as it did in your example with the Orr. It did not go for commensurate funds because it was sheet cut, and that's the market will correct itself, and that's why I think if I have the opinion that I would pay equal money and I'm happy with that, great. But as we've seen evidences in other examples, the market finds the correct levels. There's not going to be the competition for it, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be graded.
Well, so I just skipped down because we're way behind in comments now. And the one that caught my eye, and I don't know, it's a Bobby Burrell makes a comment here, and I'm not sure if he's responding to somebody else, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, because he makes I think it's a really good point, but I want to hear your opinion, Dave. He says, so sheet cut and trimming of a card would be basically the same thing. Why would that not be true? Why would that not be true? If you're, you know what I mean? If you're sheet cut, if you're buying an uncut sheet from 1966 and 2010, and you're going to take out your X-Acto knife or your laser cutter or your guillotine cutter, whatever you're going to do, and you're going to now cut that card into the proper dimensions, how is that? And I'm asking, how is that not trimming?
Well, it almost cannot happen unless that card is unnaturally large. If you trim a card out of a pack, it is now going to be too small. So it would not be able to be graded anyway.
That's a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are examples where, the exceptions to the rule. I mean, we've all heard about the T206s that were too large.
Yeah.
And then they were trimmed to be the right size, and then they became these artificial high grades. But again, if you can trim it and it still fits the standards, and it's not, there's also other parts of the process, like where it's been pressed, where it's been soaked, where there's different ways to artificially affect the size. It can almost not be equal. You have to artificially do something else. It has to artificially be too big, or it had to artificially be soaked and pressed and lard. There has to be another additional process for that to be equal.
Yeah. See, I'm struggling here because I'm not a guy. I mean, I have a Wayne Gretzky rookie card that I just sent into PSA, and I just got it back. This one right here. PSA authentic. I knew it was trimmed when I bought it at the expo, fully knew it was trimmed, but I was okay with it. I paid fair. Yeah. And I knew I'm going to get it slabbed. And I said to PSA, make sure you slab this. I wanted to say, well, I want you to slab it, even though I know it's trimmed, put trimmed on it. They didn't put trimmed. It just says authentic. So whatever that means, but I could tell it was too small. If you are, and I think this, I think some cards are trimmed innocently, like kids just do it and then they survive. So that's not, you're not trying to be fraudulent. That's not a fraudulent case. But there are cases, as we well know, where cards are being trimmed from a fraudulent, with fraudulent intentions.
Correct. So
if you're going to trim a card, whether you're shaving off a microscopic section of it, a width that is hardly even detectable, and hey, some of them have gotten by grading companies over the years too, you're still shaping the card. You're shaping it. And I'm still on this sheet cut thing. So if a sheet cut card, if you're shaping a sheet cut card from a sheet, should it not say trimmed on it or sheet cut or something? And maybe that's what Beckett wishes they could go back and change from the beginning of time, is adding that. What, you were in the room when they talked about it. What sort of light can you shed on those discussions, if any? If you don't have if you are able to speak to that, did they consider identifying those issues?
I can't speak to whether it was considered or not considered. We can say what was decided because we're here. This is where we are. But I think it's not 100%. I mean, we're talking about 79, 80 O-Pee-Chee where it's apparent, or rookie, it's apparent. You trim down a 92, 93 tops off a sheet, it's not going to be as apparent, because a lot of times the same guillotine cutting that was used to create the real cards out of the real pack can be done by somebody that is not the card company. So it would almost be disingenuous to label some. I know this is sheet cut, so we're going to put sheet cut on it. I'm not sure this is sheet cut, so we're not.
All right.
I think it was too difficult of a decision to make at that point. And like you said, sometimes we get down the road and we can't put the cat back in the bag, or whatever, however you want to say it.
No,
it's kind of damage has been done on the population, and it would be almost worse to start now than to just let it ride.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's the kind of, you have to, it's very easy for people to say a sentence that starts with "they should." Everyone likes to say "they should," but most people that say "they should" don't know all the factors involved, because they're not on the inside. And you as an insider, you as someone who knows, and has been in the hobby a long time, very intelligent, are able to think that way. And I respect it greatly. Okay, let's move along. Toa Hang says someone needs to come out with a card grader, have their own tech to review these graded cards. And we've seen there's Mike Baker authenticated. PWCC has their own eye appeal designations, which I think these things actually make sense. And a lot of people don't know that Mike Baker authenticated is a longtime professional grader. So he's not just some guy putting a sticker on a card. I think that makes sense to me. Okay, I want to go through a couple more comments here. Steve says, admittedly, I'm new to this, but I just got a 9 OC O-Pee-Chee Gretzky rookie back. They should have to tell me why they graded that versus the 7, or I didn't request. Yeah, you have to request no qualifiers, or they will put them on there. So that just comes with experience in grading, I would have to think. Rich says, I agree that the registry definitely played a role in boosting PSA's popularity. Yeah, sorry, this is an older comment, but again, I'm wondering, I agree, it boosted it, but does it still have that effect? For sure.
Yes, on certain cards.
Right, yeah, on certain, yeah. Chris Dwornik says if PSA did release a new 10, that would just create a bigger backlog because people would resubmit their old 10s trying to get the better grade, wouldn't it? Yeah, I think for sure it would. And I completely agree that it would. Hopefully, if and when they do that, they are staffed up and their staff is trained to the point where they can actually grade properly and within the requirements of a grader. Terry Fortune is right. You have to request no qualifiers, or they will put them on there. Rich Klein says all cards have to be cut from a sheet at some point. True. But does it matter that they're cut by the manufacturer or by a hobbyist in their wherever, in their basement or their workshop or their professional printing and cutting facility? Who knows? These are, I think, Dave, I think these are personal preference, and I don't know that we're ever going to get consensus on them. Do you?
No. Yeah, I mean, Bobby's right, Rich is right. But I also believe in choice. That, we're not going to grade this because of this reason. Well, we're very sure that this is a real card, and we're very sure that it meets the standards and measurement. How and where it was cut, we're not as sure, so we're not going to grade it. I'm not in that camp. But if you are, then don't buy it. That's fine, and I don't begrudge you for it.
Yeah, no, same here. Here's a cool comment by Sean Turner. He says, sheet cut is the same as box bottom cut then. And to me, I agree with that. I actually collect, I have probably 5 or 6 box bottom cards in my collection, and they're very important to me. I think they're some of the coolest cards out there. But they say hand cut. The PSA label actually says hand cut. And now that I've gotten into some of these vintage Hollywood and music cards from Europe, they all say hand cut on them. Well, the PSA label says hand cut, which is, hey, that's great. That's transparency. I like that. And that's where, yeah, I just think I think sheet cut cards would have a better rep right now in BGS holders or BVG holders if they did make that decision back in the day. But like you said, you can't go back and change it now. It's too late, but we just have to live with it and understand it as best we can.
And I think that this just helped make our point from earlier. There's no other way to get a box bottom card than hand cut.
Right.
So as opposed to the other with the sheet cut, do we know? Do we not know? The box bottom, we know. If it's a single, it was hand cut.
Yeah.
So that's why it's different.
And some of all the ones I have, you can actually see where they have the guide, it's not perforated, but as if it was perforated, those lines
right.
Where you're supposed to cut. I want to see that. I don't want a box bottom card that you do not have an obvious identification or identifier that it was from a box bottom. I want that to be obvious. And to me, that's important. Whereas, with sheet cut cards, while they also were meant to be cut from the original sheets, they weren't distributed in that fashion. And I think that's an important distinction. I think so. Brian Gray jumps in here. He says, I'll buy BGS cut 9.5 on key rookies. Please email me offers. And I just want to say to Brian directly, BG, we're going to go live on After Hours in about 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes. So please keep in mind, Brian, any of the key discussions from tonight with Dave that you want to touch on after, let's make sure that we have some continuity there, my man. He says, if a card if it's a card measures, I'm in. Yeah, I can see that, but Brian's a businessman and he knows there's a market for these things, whether it's everybody or just a niche market for it, there is a market for those things. Okay. Boy, we got lots of comments, everybody. Thank you. I want to just throw out, anyone out there, if you're new to Sports Cards Live, I want to welcome, I want to thank Dave Sliepka for inviting his friends, his hobby friends, his hobby acquaintances, anybody to the show. Welcome. We do this every Saturday, bringing you, I got to say, the best guests in hobby content. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got a Facebook group by the same name, Sports Cards Live. Please feel free to join. It will ask you for a reference. Just put my name or put Dave's name, whatever. We'll get you in there. Really appreciate that. And welcome everybody to the show if you are new. Dave, I mean, we've got several topics that were on the agenda that we didn't get to because we've been so engrossed in all this other talk. So let me put it to you. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we move on?
Well, we talked about the stocks situation and the comparisons that I was able to find there that I found incredibly interesting. I'm also, whatever the viewers are most interested in, is the past experience of the early days of Beckett. Is that interesting, or are people more interested in, hey, what are things going on now? I'm open to that. Okay.
Well, why don't we do this? We'll ask, any more, like, we got a great resource here with us, everybody. We have Dave Sliepka. As you know, if you've been with us for an hour, 40 minutes already, the guy has a lot of insights, a lot of experience. So if you have questions for Dave, put them out there, put them into the chat, and we'll address the ones that we decide to address. We were going to talk about the pipeline, Dave. The hobby pipeline is clogged. So let's get into that for a couple minutes while I look at some of the other comments coming in the chat. So to set some context, the hobby pipeline is clogged. You referred to it as an artificial environment. What did you mean by that?
2021 is not where any of us want to be. And that might sound crazy, but we all want our cards back from PSA. We all want our cards back from Beckett. We all want our orders from ComC. We all want more supplies that we can't get enough of. so we can be in a better position to capitalize on this great hobby that we're in right now. So I think we're all operating in a place where we don't want to be. And that, PSA is hurting us. BGS is hurting us. COMC is hurting us with their, 6 months to get your order back or 3 months to get your cards uploaded. Everybody's pipeline is clogged. And hey, great place to be in. This hobby has too much business. Wonderful. But when the clog is released, when everything is caught up, when all of that 9 million or whatever PSA has, when that hits the market, 2021, 2022, when all the BGS orders are out there, when COMC is able to ship on a week or a 3 days or a 5 day, when we're back to our old normal, hopefully at a higher level, not just an old normal at the old volume, at the new volume, hopefully, what is it going to look like? Your cards that you have a pop report and there's 10 tens, how many more are sitting at PSA right now? How many more of those ungraded are coming back from COMC that we haven't been able to ship back and get to PSA or get to Beckett or get to HG, get to the new companies? What is that going to look like? And I hope that people are using that as a cautionary tale, as opposed to just saying, are we in a bubble or are we not in a bubble? No, we're in a clogged pipeline is what we're in. And what is going to happen when that is finally free flowing? We all want this free flowing. We don't want to be paying $300 for a $100 rookie card. I mean, I would love to be submitting some cards right now, but it's not worth it. I use grading as being able to take a 10 or a 15 or a 20 or a $50 card up, 10, 20, 50, 100%. Now the math doesn't work because of the cost of the grading. So, I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, but I hope people are thinking about when you're waiting on your cards to get back and thinking how wonderful it's going to be when that happens. So are 9 million other people. Yeah. So that's just kind of my cautionary tale.
I think it's fair. The other clogged part of the pipeline, that you didn't mention was the printing that the card companies need to produce product.
True. Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. Is that I have been working with some manufacturers. You did mention that I work with Decision Trading Cards. We were trying to come out with Series 2 that should have been out a couple weeks ago, not by any fault of our own, but the printer's backed up. You can't get the cards printed. So if you're hearing about manufacturers pushing products back, they're not happening as quick. What people may or may not be hearing is the delays are happening at the printing level, is that they have so much volume, or there's so many more cards and so many more brands being printed and so many more newcomers wanting to print. Another clog.
Yeah. And the manufacturers get a lot of flack from the hobby on release dates being pushed back, but it's
sometimes it's in their control, and this is one case that it's really not.
Yeah. There's only so much capacity out there. So, okay.
So be patient with Series 2 on Decision 2020 trading cards. It should hopefully be coming by the end of the month. But again, a lot of it not in the control of the manufacturers.
Something you told me the other night that I thought was really cool was that had to do with the silver bricks, or what do we call them? The silver plates, or
silver bars?
The bars, thank you. The silver bars that go into Panini's Eminence product.
More than just Eminence, they use solid gold and solid silver bars across a lot of their high-end brands, including National Treasures, including Eminence, and including I'm drawing a blank on some of the others. But
where do they get those from?
I am a vendor for that product. Thank you, Jeremy. And also this is a prototype. This is not the real thing, but this is like Contenders gold card. They also do them in silver, where it's actually printed on the surface of gold, and it actually brings real value to you get these briefcase boxes where they cost you 500, 1,000, 2,000 a pack, but at least you're getting some real value. Like here's an example of an NFL bar that you can find. There might only be 10 Brady's and 10 Tomlinsons and 10 whatever, but they put those in the product. And that's one of the things that when I went into the coin in the hobby, or the coin in the metals business, and I got experience there over the 2 years that I was out of the traditional hobby. I kind of brought that experience back and helped different manufacturers, including Panini, that want to put those things in their products. So I really get a lot of satisfaction out of that when I'm at the mint or I'm at a designer and we're looking at something that is a little bit off center or a little bit unclear, and the mint, they're going to want to say that, oh, that's okay. Most people would accept that. And I'd say, not for what these people are paying for this product and where it's going. They are not going to accept that.
Right.
That's got to be perfectly centered. That is not clean enough. That some cannot be okay and some be okay. They all have to be perfect. So I love having the hobby representation to the non-hobby vendor and, being able to provide quality product to companies like Panini.
And so just so I'm clear, when Panini puts a metal bar into a card, they get it from you, or are you one of a few vendors that they use for those inputs? Right
now, they're all coming from me. And
that's pretty
they
cool.
come from a local mint here in Dallas, Texas, that we have them manufactured at. That's the company that I had worked for previously and held a great relationship, and still continue to do that. So, I joke sometimes that when I'm making the delivery, that when I look on the market and see some of these cards in the secondary market, I can say, at some point that bar was in the back of my Tahoe.
I just think it's so cool that you're the guy that supplies those. It's nice. It's just nice to see it's nice to know. It's just neat to know that that's where they come from. And
I've got one around here somewhere I wanted to show, but boy, do you have the slide or the image of that Pulisic?
I don't have it to bring up quickly. I'm sorry.
We'll show that at some point, but people know what the solid silver bars and solid gold bars look like.
Are you talking about the Elemental Mint product?
No, that was before Panini.
Okay, I don't. But listen, we are running out of time, Dave. So we're just gonna have to get you back on the show so we can continue the discussion another time. So
absolutely,
yeah, we're definitely gonna have you back. But we're not done yet. I just want to do a couple comments. Kevin Jones says this has been a great conversation. Thank you, Kevin. And Kevin reminded me that at the end of the night, so we're talking about just over 2 hours from now, I am going to open up a room on Clubhouse. If any of you out there are on the Clubhouse app, check it out. We'll have a room. Try to follow at Sports Cards Live, and you'll find the room that I'm going to open up, and we're going to continue the conversation. And Dave, if you're still awake, I hope you're no pressure because it's going to be late, I know. Yeah. But if you're still awake, if not, no problem. I hope you can join. But for anyone else out there, kind of remember what you want to talk about. Have any questions, comments? Let's debrief tonight's episodes a little bit on Clubhouse later on. And to remind everybody, in about 10 minutes, we're going to start the After Hours show, which is a brand new broadcast still on the Sports Cards Live YouTube channel, but a different broadcast. So you'll go to the main channel and you'll see it come up there in about 10 minutes with Brian Gray, and that is called After Hours. Here's a question that Seth Gordon has put up a couple of times, and I'm sorry, Seth, I'm just getting into it now. So I don't know if you have any insight into this, Dave, but he says, how often are graders required to take breaks and rest their eyes?
Oh, good question. I don't know if there's a requirement, but I also don't think that there's a guy that wouldn't want to. I mean, I know that lunch is a pretty serious event at BGS, and they sure enjoy getting out of that room and sharing the horror stories or talking about different things, and sharing information about what they see on cards is just as big a part of the job as quote unquote retraining. Is that there could be a consistency that they see where you notice that this card or this brand always has X or always has Y. Should we be hard on that or not as hard on that? And those are the conversations that I would just love overhearing, and I know that it brings a lot of value to the sharpness of the guys there. But I can guarantee you they are taking breaks.
Yeah. Okay. Good to
At
hear.
least at BGS, and I sure hope they are at PSA too, because you guys deserve it.
Yeah. Okay, a couple of questions I want to address really quickly. Willie T says, Dave, because you're associated with grading, can you collect graded cards? Looking at your room, you obviously still collect. So do you collect? And I don't think you couldn't.
I'm not really associated with grade. I mean, I'm not paid by Beckett. I'm not paid by PSA. I'm not a vendor or a client or any relationship with grading right now. So anything that I've talked about has been the past. There's nothing current there. But yes, I am an avid collector and avid submitter to multiple grading companies, and I have COMC accounts. I have eBay. I am a collector. Yes, and that has never stopped. Yeah. Are we going to do the 5?
No.
Okay.
We're not going to have time.
No problem. No problem. Because in that 5, one of my regret answers would have been that I have some Gretzky rookies that I never got graded. They're sitting here because my philosophy as a collector was, if I'm not going to sell it, I don't need to get it graded. Well, now that's cost me a lot of money.
Because now to get them graded eventually is going to cost more.
What I could have done for $25 is now going to cost me $300 to $500 or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Ryan O'Hara says, what does Dave collect? Any particular hockey? Or not?
Not hockey. Not as much anymore. I was a pretty active Rona collector, but I don't collect hockey as much as I used to. But I collect a lot of guys that come out of my college. I collect, I still keep up with some of the other players from my youth, like Bucky Dent and Ozzie Guillen, just because it's cheap to collect them. But I'm all over the road. Soccer is probably more of a passion for me than hockey. Hockey was a lot bigger for me in the 80s and 90s.
Okay. And then listen, so we're going to wind this episode down because we're going to go live with Brian in about 7 minutes. So I just want to, there's one more comment that Rich brought up, Dave, that I'm going to bring up, ask you to speak about it for a couple minutes to kind of on our way out. But before we do that, I do want to thank you, man. This has been maybe the fastest 2-hour episode we've ever had. So
me too. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm definitely going to ask you to come back. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it immensely, actually. Just a great person to talk to and to bring to the Sports Cards Live audience. I feel very honored to have you.
Thank you.
So thank you. And I want to thank the chat tonight. You guys put out some really great questions and comments. I greatly appreciate pretty much all of it. And I hope that person that I took out at the beginning was able to get back in. It just looked like the comments were being spammed, and I don't think that was the case. Joe says, wonderful show. Thank you, Joe. House of Jordans, Chris, great to see you. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you, Seth Gordon. Appreciate those comments as well. So, okay, before we go to the final topic, I do want to remind everybody, Brian Gray After Hours 10 minutes from now, even less, 5 or 6 minutes from now. If I don't see you there, if we don't see you on Clubhouse later on tonight, have a great week. We'll see you next Saturday back with DJ Ski on the first show and Adam Gray from Basketball Card Fanatic on the final show, on the late show. Okay, so Rich Klein says, in all seriousness, Dave, with what he has done for his wife over the years, has been an inspiration for those who know him. Can you do you want to speak? Do you want to speak to this, Dave, and just maybe let the audience kind of know what Rich is getting at and what's going on in your life a little bit?
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it. And the people that know me, it's no secret. My wife was diagnosed with Huntington's disease in 2007. That's a degenerative brain disease that is really ALS and all the others combined. It's just awful, and it's taken her away from me and my 2 boys. And she's in her final months now, and it's been a long road, but it's been rewarding to be able to share that journey. But I appreciate the support. The people in this hobby have been amazing. And I think, the closeness and the friendships that I've gained that have come out of the hobby, but have helped me in my personal life. It's just, it's amazing. But if you're not familiar with Huntington's disease, look it up. It's pretty awful. And Thankfully, early in our marriage, my wife was supportive of the hobby and supportive of my career, and she'd be proud of this.
I'm glad to hear that she'd be proud of this. It's truly an honor to give you the platform tonight.
Thanks. Thanks.
I want to say happy anniversary. I saw on Facebook. I don't know if it's today or yesterday or when that post was, but
yeah, it was 2 days ago, and it's 25 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've a few people that have mentioned to me just what a mensch you are, what a great guy you are, and how wonderful you've been throughout this challenging process. So I don't know what else I can say, but I look up to you, man. I look up to you. I just got to know you, but I do, and I think you're just a great guy and an inspiration to many. And your kids should be proud of you, and I'm sure you are. All those things, man. All the touchy feelies. I want to share them with you.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best and as easy as the future can be for you and your boys and your wife, of course, as well. Okay, we are going to wrap this up. Again, thank you so much, everybody. We'll be back with Brian Gray in about 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to fill up my water and be back with Brian on the new broadcast. So if we don't see you there, good night. And thank you, everyone, so much. And thanks again to Dave. Been a pleasure having you, man.
One quick endorsement. If people don't know who Jeff Morris is, don't let that keep you from watching that episode. I think it's in 2 weeks. Jeff is one of my great friends in the business, and I promise you there will be the most laughs in that episode because he is such a funny guy. He was a big player in the business a few years ago, and one of my good friends who also wrote about. He's a great writer, and I was honored to have him write about me and Bev in a newspaper article a couple of years ago, and. So even if you don't know who Jeff is, I encourage you to make sure you watch that episode in a couple of weeks. I can't wait. I
appreciate that. And he worked for Pacific Trading Cards for a while with Mike. Kramer. Mike Kramer. Yeah.
And Collectors. He was also at Collector's Edge.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for that endorsement. And with that, good night, everybody. Dave, you hang tight there for 2 seconds, and we'll see you all on After Hours. If not next week, if not on Clubhouse later on tonight. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.